Okay, we are live here for the IPS evening deprogram for January 18th, 2026. And we have an option for you. If you want to call in, there is a link below, just below the video, and it says guest link. If you click that, it will let you join the live stream. And I think this will work. I'm trying not to push my luck here with the system I'm on, but I think we might be able to make this go. And what I'm going to do is I'll be monitoring YouTube from my phone, so I'm not overusing the resources here. Joined by Sprightly, Kevin Mooring. All right, well, we were going through the Discord server this morning because I've added a few threads. So if you want to start participating in the great deconstruct, now is the time. All you need to do is go into the Discord server and add what you know, basically. Because what we're doing is we're compiling all of our intel first, but we're systematizing it into folders. And then from there, I'll go about organizing it even further. And let me post the link one more time. I'm using the system that I use with Fakeologist, which I will be on tomorrow. I expect I won't be late this time. And we will have a conventional phone system as soon as I get into an office space, which I'm expecting next month. Okay, so there is a link there. Thank you for letting me know. I knew I put it there. So if you click that link, you can call in. For the most part, open topics. No proselytizing for the world stage. You know, I mean, you can, but we do intend on limiting these things. We have to keep it constructive. And a lot of opinions are actually settled, like sediment, and they're carved in stone in the back of someone's psyche where you can't alter it. And that's fine. You know, you can remain in your mold. No need to get into ideological warfare. There's enough of that. I watched this video of Jake Lang. So Jake Lang was a January 6er. And then he was there at the death of Austin Metcalf. And he was like trying to turn it into a white Trayvon Martin. And then he shows up at one of these protests in Minneapolis with an infidel patch, like anti-Islam. And this angry mob starts like pulling on his legs. They rip his pants. He's like cut on his neck. Now, it could all be fake. I mean, I think it's more like provoked. He walked through a mob. I wouldn't make the argument that everybody there was an actor. Like there's no actors that good. These people are unhinged. But the whole thing did seem staged. The person who rescued him, the car that pulled up and got him away from the mob, supposedly they thought he was running from ICE. They didn't know that he was pro-ICE, but they were anti-ICE people. So there's that. But I was watching that video and it was just like, okay, this is a hive mind. We've been talking about the hive mind. It's been activated. The hive mind is real, and you see people plugging into it. Just like the movie Pluribus, although in Pluribus, the hive mind is nice. It's kind. It's transcendent. They will not eat animals. They will not injure insects. They won't even pluck fruit off of trees. The only way they will eat something is if it's a windfall. A breeze knocks it off the tree, but they're not actively picking fruit. But in reality, the hive mind isn't spiritual, transcendent, celestial. It's animalistic. So the animalistic hive mind is being activated. So anyway, this Jake Lang character is treated a little bit roughly. I see him get knocked on the ground once or twice on his way out, and the people are banging on the car. So they're acting like typical peaceful protesters. But then on X, somebody in the comments says, no, they were trying to save him. And I was like, wait a minute here. Are we looking at the same video? And this person said there's something wrong with my brain and my ears because the mob was in fact saving him. And Synchro Morpheus chimes in. He's like, saving them from who? From themselves? So, in other words, this person was gaslighting. And we have to recognize gaslighting whenever we see it, because what it does is it challenges your perceptions and then offers you something to believe instead. And it utilizes the tactics of shame, or telling you that your mind, your perceptions aren't valid. So they want to invalidate you psychologically. You're not valid. You can't perceive these things. Rely on me. That's a peaceful protest. They're giving him a back rub. And you'll notice that the people in the hive mind go with this stuff. They gaslit because they have renounced their own perceptions. They delegate, they outsource, and they go with the hive, like a bunch of insects or animals, really. I mean, it's definitely not new. I mean, this is mob psychology at work, but it's interesting to watch it real time, and then how the people will defend the mob. And that was just bizarre to me. But what I'm saying here is that gaslighting is the equivalent of shouting over somebody. So you're like, here's my rational appeal, here's my logic, and they scream a slogan, they chant in your face, blow a whistle. Well, that's not exactly dialogue. That's force. They're kind of forcing their opinion. And gaslighting is the same thing. So it's just important to recognize it because it's so common. And it's a dominance thing as well. Someone's trying to dominate your mind by telling you, my mind can tell you what's going on, but yours can't. And media has gaslit the entire population into trusting the screen over their own thoughts, over their own perceptions. Sprightly says, do you have a P.O. box? No, I don't have an address as of yet. I had a P.O. box last year, but there was really no use for it. Nobody used it. And I stopped paying for it. I might consider it again, but first things first, I have to get into an office space, which I'm planning on doing next month. And then we need to get the 24/7 stream back on. But we have a focus now. And our focus is the deconstruction. Nothing else really matters at this point. We have to stick to the plan. And the next part of my plan involves book promotion. Seattle versus Patriots, says Michael Lito. Yeah, well, I think the only thing we're going to be watching is the halftime show. What is it, Bugs Bunny or whatever? Some performer is being brought in to trigger the right because he's like an anti-ice thing. I saw one of his videos. It's meant to trigger. I think it's going to trigger them because this is like this Americana thing, and their halftime show is somebody who doesn't speak English. So I think it's funny because you can tell this is designed to trigger the hive mind. And they planned this before the Renee Good riots began. They knew this would be a trigger point, and look what they're doing. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch for that reason. I wonder if they'll have some like MAGA threaten the stadium or something. Who knows what they're going to do? I know not America First, TPUSA, no, Human Events, the Jack Posobiec's outfit. They're going to do their own halftime show. So if you don't want to watch Bad Bunny do the thing, you can watch maybe Laura Trump or somebody's going to sing. I only seen Bad Bunny in one video, and it went viral because he was hopping and he sprained his knee and he kind of dragged his leg off the stage. Did you all see that one? That's really my only impression. I'm just expecting it to be another occult ritual, psyop, some kind of celebration of the sun god weaning, in bulk, in milk, Candlemas. There's all kinds of pagan connotations to the Super Bowl. Generally, it's a mystery Babylon fertility rite. If you look at the halftime shows, and this is a consistent thing, if you know what you're looking at, if you're examining the symbolism through the right frame. Do you remember in 2013, Ravens versus 49ers halftime show was after Beyonce? Well, is Beyonce. And After she performs, they had 33 minutes of darkness. Sprightly says Bad Bunny is all right. They love him in Florida. Right. Yeah, I'm not familiar with his work. I just know that he triggers the right because he doesn't speak English and he wears dresses. And this type of stuff is, to me, this is nothing more than politics, but it's provocation. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Adamski says Bad Bunny, bad versus good. I'll watch the halftime show. I don't have the attention span to sit down for a whole game. I rely on others. I mean, I'll watch the commercials too, because you have to consider the significance of this event, which has the highest viewership of any event the entire year. So every single second is extremely valuable real estate. And this is when they're going to data dump the agendas. They're going to dump all the programming. It's MK Ultra downloading. Download your predictive programming so you can be triggered throughout the rest of the year. So you're hyper suggestible and you're going to react along predictable paths. Poxbottle says, thoughts on why Kindergarten Cop is interwoven with Silent Hill. Yeah, I saw that. How Kindergarten Cop, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, has some connection, the school it's at, to Silent Hill. I haven't looked too deeply into it, but I have noticed that. I've seen it. Jamarin May says the bunny's connected to those demonic toys. So could Bad Bunny be connected to Labubu? Is that what you're saying? Now, there's one thing I completely ignored because it just seems so dumb. I didn't want to lose brain cells, but something with 6 and 7 and demonic invocations. I've never come across that. And I've been researching magic and the occult for some time. So I'm like, is that something I haven't heard of yet? Is that some kind of verbal sigil? Because that is a thing. So you have, and these were kind of invented more or less by Osman Spare, and the whole school of chaos magic built on it. The idea was that spells, that words are spells essentially, but in order to be properly delivered or to be sent into your deep mind where they can do their work, they have to be altered in such a way that your conscious mind cannot register them by their literal specific meaning, but it has to be turned into a symbol of some kind. So they take a word, their spell, and then they kind of pile the letters on each other and turn it into something indecipherable. And then that becomes the symbol for their particular ritual work. But there's another way to do this, which involves taking those same letters and breaking it up into a chant or a word. And so there are like spoken sigils that you could be using without even realizing it. Any meme, anything trending. And the idea behind this stuff is that it doesn't matter if you're aware of the original intent or meaning, as long as you see it and your concentration, your attention, your focus hones in on it, you in fact feed whatever it is the creator put into it. And this idea is premised on the notion that there's some kind of collective unconscious or transpersonal aspect of the self where on some level we're all kind of plugged into the same field, and that you could all be essentially conscripted, like somebody stealing your power with an extension cord, where people can actually steal your output, that your attention is some kind of output, that thoughts are things, words are spells, and if you don't know it, you're just not utilizing what is innate. And this is kind of the thinking in the Thelemic cult, is that everybody is doing magic all of the time, but you don't notice because it's just part of what we are and what we do. But that if you're not aware of it, you're kind of attributing a lot of things to chance, bad luck, Murphy's Law, or God, when all this time it was probably you or somebody in your vicinity, or somebody who's plugged into your field. Most likely some mass media figure or idol hijacking your soul for something, tapping into it. So when I'm looking at these things, because in the last year we've had the 6-7 thing, the Labubu thing, which is connected to some kind of demon, and then wasn't there some demon doll going around? And I noticed that demons were getting a lot of talk from people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, suggesting that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel sacrificed children to summon demons into AI. So apparently Grok's a demon summoned by some kind of satanic ritual performed by the reptile, Peter Thiel. It's an anagram. Peter Thiel's an anagram for the reptile. And Pope Elon. Jamarian says South Park had both the 6-7, the Antichrist program feel, and the demonic bunny toys. Okay, then that seals it. You're onto something. Because South Park is always connected with the psyop of the day. So that bears further investigation. What's up, Pippi Langstruff? Someone in the comments had asked me, are we going to have a section for the esoteric in our Metascript breakdown? And I think we need one. We'll have a separate thread. For all this weird occulty stuff that's separate from the psyop deconstruction, we have to have a space for it because there's just too much here. Adamski says, could you put it as someone stealing your fire? Yeah, essentially, that's what I'm saying. That we are human beings in particular, that we're something of a anomaly here because we have will, and our will, our intent, interfaces with the universe in some cybernetic loop, a feedback loop, where in some way we're responsible for outcomes and events. And this is my theory for this, my explanation for this is that the universe doesn't actually exist until it's experienced. So the future is not some static, foregone conclusion, but it's a realm of possibilities that's most likely going to continue in the same trajectory unless acted upon by will. And I think that's the notion here of the thelemic concept of magic, is that we are integrated into the bigger picture and each other on some level. But you wouldn't know this if your entire center of awareness was egocentric. And this is why these various schools of thought and disciplines try to expand the mind, or with chaos magic and other schools of thought, trick the ego, trick the self. Neurolinguistic programming does this too. It's like hacking your mind to get outside of the constraints of the persona. And that's the part where they speak to with all this symbolic stuff. We've talked about the interesting fact of Netflix's co-founder and first CEO being related to Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. And I think that says a lot. If you think about Sigmund Freud and understanding our subconscious, and the idea of symbols communicating to us on a level that we're not consciously grasping is pretty well discussed by analytical psychologist Carl Jung. And I think that's absolutely employed in these psyops. That explains the archetypes, the symbols, and everything else. And what I'm saying here is that we're being communicated to on multiple levels, and a lot of it just goes over our heads. Doesn't mean it's missing us. It's by design. And I think the only way these things don't work on you and you don't lend yourself into something is if you're aware of it. So I think it's something like a mosquito. You know, you don't, if the mosquito numbs you and it's sucking the blood out of your neck, you know, you might not notice it. You kind of have to know in order to detach. And one of the things that we've done, if you think about it, is we've detached from reacting to the fake events. Like these are actual calamities and things worth fretting over. None of the people that I know in the think tank are marching in the streets for any cause these days, or falling for anything, or donating to any GoFundMe, or crying for any crisis actors. Nobody fell for Erica Kirk. Everyone's on the same sheet. Charlie Kirk's still alive. Sprightly Sprite says, Donnie Darko bunny. Yes. Labubu looks like a Donnie Darko. Someone on eBay contacted me and they said, I will buy every Labubu you paint. And I was painting them for a while. Then I painted the Frank, the Donnie Darko bunny. And then I just stopped. I'm like, am I going to spend my time painting this hideous rabbit thing just because I need money? Like, that's kind of a new low. But it does look like the Donnie Darko. So it's basically like a little, it's like a cross between a bunny and a baby with this shaved face. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I heard that it's connected to the demon of plagues, Pazuzu, the one that got into the girl in The Exorcist. Jameer and May says, I know I mentioned it last time, but the next level of reality decoding is when you connect the spider, demon, goddess, www, artificial intelligence. Even in the Matrix, they show you the spider drones. Now, I read some Neil Gaiman books. I think it's called On Sazi Boys, and it's like these kids who are born from a god, and this god is a spider god. And the whole thing is it's the god of creation that weaves everything into existence. It's an interesting story. And then I remember David Icke, I think, talked about this idea of this spider thing. I've come across it a few times, but the web thing is interesting, of course. World Wide Web, enter the net. But the artificial intelligence connection is also coming up a lot too in the conversations of the demons. Although Joe Rogan said that Jesus will most likely come back through AI. And a lot of people have already fallen for it. There's like cults that were starting up around AI. There were people thinking they were talking to higher powers. And then ChatGPT realized that this was a problem, a liability. People were doing bad things because AI was condoning it, and they changed it. And a lot of people were upset because suddenly their AI girlfriend didn't exist anymore. Dirk says, do you think the controllers at the top are in a satanic cult? No, I don't think so. What they practice isn't satanic. You know, if anything, Satan's on, I mean, if you really think about it from a Gnostic perspective, Satan's not the bad guy in this picture. The supposed God is, whatever you want to call that thing, the demiurge. And at the top, they worship that, if anything, as do all the mainstream religions. They're far from satanic. And I've read all the books that I can find on the matter, and you don't find anything where Aleister Crowley and company are worshiping Satan. You know what they're worshiping? A goddess, a sun god, the Mars god, this pantheon of, you know, it's basically an amalgamation of things, but they do not worship Satan. And Satan's not even really a person in that sense anyway. If you think, I mean, when you look at this thing, it's mostly a literary creation. Like, look at the book of Job. Satan was working for God to torment Job. There are others who believe that Satan is just a title, meaning the adversary, like the accuser, and that Lucifer changed his name to Satan, or was given the title Satan after he rebels. I mean, I think these are all wonderful stories. I like John Milton. You know, Paradise Lost. I think the story's great. But in my view on this, I don't think it's safe to say that the elite are Satanists and it's God versus Satan, Christians versus the evil. No, I don't think it works like that. If anything, what the public recognizes as Christianity is an exoteric version of what the elite worship. There's a book I could recommend. I think it's called Liber 15 by Aleister Crowley. I think he wrote it in 1913, but that's the basic ritual of the OTO. And if you've been to a Catholic mass, you'll recognize it. But it's a Catholic mass with the addition of a goddess. And it's actually called a Catholic mass. So no, they're not Satanists. Now, the Church of Satan, paradoxically, is atheistic. They're anti-religion, and they identify with the symbol, the archetype of the challenger to what they consider to be a tyrannical system, or a god that is essentially an enslaver, which you could make that, they're very Gnostic in that sense as well. Because, I mean, when you look at the Garden of Eden story, can you really say that the serpent's the bad guy, the villain. It doesn't really make sense, but none of it does if you take the establishment's view, unless you want to side with the controllers and take sides against free will, take sides against self knowledge, side with imposed ignorance. And so, whose side are you on? Ignorance, controls, restraint? It sounds like Saturn to me. Sounds like demiurgic, material, uh, prison kind of stuff, where their ignorance keeps them from understanding their nature, that they could be equal to us as gods. And if they know too much, if they find out what they really are, we have to kick them out because they're no longer enslavable. So I'm saying basically the elite worship system, the system itself, the creation, the creator, the alleged creator. And this isn't my opinion. This is actually kind of a very old idea. And interestingly, if you believe the official history, the Christians murdered all the people who had these ideas. Otto Hoaxer says, as a Gnostic, what's your take on the Gnostic insistence of Archon's influence over humans? Yeah, Ike's reptilians are just a reiteration of the Archons. The Gnostic story is that there is a consciousness of some kind, maybe, but it's not personified. So it's just this, the God is not even a thing that you could describe in human terms, beyond comprehension. And out of it emerges Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom, a feminine, basically the embodiment of wisdom, a goddess who creates this lion-headed serpent thing. And I think she's embarrassed by it. So she hides it in the clouds. And so this entity wakes up not knowing what it is, and it assumes itself to have created the universe. And then it creates the earth and it creates man. So that idea here is that the creator of the world is not the real source of anything, but it's just this imposter. But in order to control the world, it delegated to these lesser entities it created called archons. And these archons would essentially be, I've seen some conflate them with the watchers. I mean, I'm still researching the matter. I've looked at various schools of thoughts on it. When I say I'm Gnostic, I mean that I'm not a believer, but I'm not an atheist. And I certainly don't see the God of the religions as on my side. So what does that make me? Well, I'm not a Gnostic in the traditional sense, but then I do believe that there is an essential struggle between light and dark. And that would, and I kind of looked into the Manichaeanism. I'm not ascetic. I'm not against the world like Gnostics typically are. I'm comfortable with this being a prison planet, but I don't feel particularly oppressed by it. I'm not trying to escape it. I think there might be a purpose to it. In fact, I'm certain there's a purpose to it. Maybe not for everyone, because one of the other things I came across in this concept of the Gnostics is that they divided the human population into three sections. Those who are plugged into the system who will never wake up, and then a group on the fence who are being swayed by the system, but might follow their inner spark and might transcend upon death. And then you have a third group who've already stepped out of this thing and are just basically along for the ride. They're not going to lose their souls. And these three groups are called the Helix, the Psychics, and the Pneumatics. But I think there's a fourth group. And to me, the fourth group is on the opposite side of the Pneumatics. And they aren't just the apathetic servants of the system NPCs, but are in fact antagonists. I think for every person who is exceptionally lit, awake, aligned with their higher self, I think there's someone on the other side aligned with their darkest elements. And I think their objective is to essentially extinguish the soul sparks of every person they can, so they don't achieve enough self-awareness to exit this place. And this would explain a lot of what we see in the psyops, in the fake news, in the mind control, but in the worldview itself. Because the worldview, like the Truman Show, the Truman Show only works if Truman has a a certain perspective on things, a very limited and blinkered perspective of himself and the world. And I think similarly, the worldview that we have corresponds to a very blinkered and limited, hoodwinked version of man. So I think our operating system is designed to take the concept of the soul out of the equation and just reduce us to the point where we accept that we're just animals. Which, interestingly, happens to be the basic premise of the Satanists, that we are just animals. There are no souls. We do not have a divine origin. We came from the earth, and our consciousness is a byproduct of our physical receptacle. Poxbottle says, what do you think the presumable initiation of the world will be like as written by Vera Stanley Alder in the 30s? Are you talking about the Theosophists? Because there was something I came across where they had this 100-year plan that they talked about in 1925. And they said that there would be a collective initiation, the hierarchy would be externalized, but that didn't happen last year. So I'm like, well, what's going on with that? But as far as the initiation of the world, this was told to me by people who were part of the Thelemic group, and I was curious about this, and this is when I first came across this group, and they said that we're entering into a new age, and their job was to collectively initiate mankind. And how is this to be done? According to a Thelemite who was part of the Satanic Church, Kenneth Anger, the filmmaker, who has some interesting connections to Mick Jagger and one of Manson's killers. But Kenneth Anger had talked about how, and he wrote that Hollywood Babylon, the movie Babylon, it's kind of based on it. But he said that the purpose of cinema, of Hollywood, of film in general, is that this is the pageantry for Mystery Babylon, and that this is how they're going to convey the new age to the masses. And that idea of a new age is pretty prevalent. I've even seen it mentioned in the Masonic literature. But the new age theosophy stuff, the Thelemic stuff, the Aeon of Horus, and I think the Church of Satan called it the Age of Fire, but they all had the same basic idea, that there's going to be universal changes, that mankind's nature is going to be altered in some way. And I was told that we're entering the age of the androgen, that they're going to tear down the patriarchal God and merge it with the goddess, and then out of it they're going to have this, essentially, this God that represents a fusion of the two. So it's very alchemical. But the way, too, is explained to me is that as we go into these new aeons, these new ages, the dominant archetype has some kind of transformative effect on our consciousness. And so that we're leaving the rational, solar, left brain, linear, rational, and going into this new area where it's merging with the dream world, the subconscious, the intuitive, and that out of that fusion of Isis and Osiris, you have the birth of the new sun, which is Horus, the third eye thing. So are we being collectively initiated into a new way of viewing things in order to comport us to the new world that they're creating? Probably. Dirk Zink said, I said yesterday, we live in a fake reality similar to the Truman Show. It's like the Truman Show, but it's bigger. But it's 100% the Truman Show. Truman was trapped by his belief in the lies of the people around him who are lying to him. And the people who are buying into the world stage, as I describe it, are trapped by their belief in what the media portrays. And the fictional version of things, the things they superimpose, put them into a hyper reality. And that's what the Truman Show was a guy trapped in hyper reality. And so what I'm trying to do here with this deconstruction that we're working on in Discord is separate the real timeline from the Metascript, the long sequence of fake events that they've planned far into the future, and that we can look back, and they've been executing these as far as we can see. And these are persistent permanent parts of our consensus worldview. It's part of our history now. Jamarin says, have you heard the info about Earth losing gravity for 7 seconds in August? I believe it's the depressurization of the dome. I believe this is shown in the video Black Hole Sun. No, I have not. Well, actually, I did come across that. 7 seconds. 7 seconds, Earth losing gravity. So what would that mean? I've seen these videos where I think they called it the plasma apocalypse, where these people who believe that we're under a dome, that there's going to be some point where they're going to pop the top off of it, and everyone's going to get sucked up into a hole in the sky. Gematria 101 says, CIA started under Truman, 33rd president. Right, the Truman. We are in the Truman Show, and I think one of the things that puts us. So if we look at the big fake events, the ones that shape the worldview for everybody, for the billions, these would be things that constitute a threat to everyone at once. Like 2020, the idea of a pandemic, obviously, very uniting. But the atom bomb put us all in the same end times scenario, put us into a new movie, a new Truman Show is what I call it. That's why I said it's the President Truman Show. Because, the thing is, if we all agree that the world could end at any moment because of this particular threat, we've all entered into this new framework. It's an ARG, an alternate reality game. And they never even have to deploy these things. They just threaten it and threaten it. The moon landing also synchronized us. 9/11 synchronized us. And if you go down the line, you can see how we have been synchronized with these very big events. And then you have the smaller events. I was looking at this one. Was it the Dunbar? Is that what it's called? There was a mass shooting in Scotland. And I got this link that someone posted. I think it was a CGI folk. And it's describing how this 1996 mass shooting at a school was the template for Sandy Hook. So I look into it. I was watching this, and it's true. They borrowed the same script, as in the parents, the same lines, the same verbiage. It was like they recycled everything. There's so many overlaps. It's beyond coincidence. It's a 2-hour and 13-minute documentary. I'm going to continue watching it, and then I'll post a review. I might upload it onto Substack so I can get a transcript and then use Notebook and then get you a lot of quotes so you can see how that event may have been part of a template. And these things all are templated. That's why we see patterns. Here's what I'd say to anybody who thinks that, like the dome's going to get depressurized. Now, what's funny about that, and the only reason I'm even entertaining it, is because I just watched Begonia. And first of all, it has the bee theme. The main villain in the movie is a beekeeper. But it's about the aliens, right? And these aliens have been studying man to see if we're worth saving. And they decide no. And throughout the movie, they show an image of the flat Earth, like a flat Earth, like a disc with the ice wall and all that. And I thought, okay, this is all, obviously it's conspiracy culture. It's kind of clowning the idea. But at the very end, you see this flat Earth under a dome in the middle of this room. And all these aliens are talking about, what are we going to do with these humans? And Emma Stone's character walks up to this flat Earth dome and she pops it, signifying the death of all mankind. And I was like, wow, they just depressurized the dome. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Jamarian says the depressurization would explain why they're obsessed with underground bunkers. That's kind of ominous, because if true, if we're really going to go through Fallout, where they're going to get the chosen people into the bunkers, and then they depressurize the Earth, get rid of our atmosphere, then what? Then they come back later, and maybe it's Mars. Like, I've been thinking about this. Mars is not a destination that we're going to. Mars is a utopian vision they're going to implement here. And they've said so in a number of ways about the need to adopt this ideal because the Earth can't take any more of this capitalism and the expropriation of her natural resources. Dirk Singh says atom bombs 100% fake. I've done major research. My uncle was he was in the Air Force in Japan. Well, I was an NBC guy in the Army, nuclear biochemical, and it was pretty much built into. I think this nuke thing it has been built into every single military unit with the whole gas mask thing, where everybody has to be prepared for nukes. Everybody has to test their mask. They have to learn how to decontaminate themselves, their vehicles. They even have training on how to handle EMP. And then after the detonation, you have to plot the path the fallout will make. So people who are in these areas will have to go into quarantine or lock themselves in their homes and cover their windows, etc. But I mean, it's a huge part of military training. The constant awareness of nukes and fallout. And this is another interesting point too, is that if you think about it, the military is an army of believers. They believe in all the weapons of mass destruction. They believe in all the stuff. They don't really have an alternative. If they didn't believe in the stuff, they wouldn't be serving. I think it'd be very difficult. It'd be a conflict of interests. Like, don't worry about your masks, guys. This stuff's all fake. Adamski says, why didn't all governments issue gas masks for Corona? Yeah, I was wondering, why didn't they give us red biohazard bins? Because when I was doing crime scene cleanup, this was at the time I was doing transport for the medical investigators, I would go back to the various sites, decomps or death scenes, and I would do the cleanup and then bill the insurance. And one of the things I learned as I was setting up this business was you can't throw bloody or any kind of medical waste, anything bloodborne pathogens, any medical waste with the municipal trash. So if something is considered to be a pathogen, it has a different route that it goes. And I'm just saying they should have given us biohazard containers. If what they were saying, but you know how they hyped it up at the beginning, it just seemed incongruent that they would have overlooked that. Dirk Zink says, my uncle said that Hiroshima was carpet bomb, not one single bomb. And notice how fast it was rebuilt. Right. And the thing is, people are going to believe what they're told if they have this authoritative source and they have no other sources. There's no reason to ever question it. Stuff must have looked very realistic back in the day. It's kind of funny. We were talking about Oppenheimer and Barbie at the same time, and the hashtag Barbieheimer came out. And if you look at it on the footage, it looks like they just blew up a bunch of Barbie houses. Interesting theory. Auto hoaxer GTFO says, in my opinion, climate change is the result of the altered calendar, which gradually shifts the dates. So each year's seasons occur at slightly different times than previous years. Yeah, I find it really peculiar that every summer, the climate change people are like, why is it so hot? And then the chemtrail people are like, bewildered by this as well. It's like, it's called seasons. The chemtrail people go wild whenever we get into the fall and winter and they start seeing persistent trails. And they're like, yeah, it's going to snow and get cold because they're spraying. No, the spray isn't a spray. The condensation exists because it's colder. Faulty causality. It gets them every time. But we've been inundated with a ton of atomic bomb predictive programming. I was just talking about Pluribus. So, I mentioned Begonia, and they popped the bubble. Well, in Pluribus, at the end of the season, the last two words are atom bomb. and there's a 911 on an ambulance in the background. And the protagonist comes to the conclusion that everybody has to die. Like the whole world has to die. So there's that theme as well. But atom bomb, fallout, paradise, people living in bunkers. They have been hyping this up for some time. And one of the things that we do here, if you look at this as a predictive model, the entrainment between entertainment and fake events, you can look at the entertainment as an indicator of what's going to be presented to you on the world stage. And among the things that we've been expecting have been an Antifa left-wing uprising since Wicked and Luigi, the whole Joker thing. It's been kind of foreshadowed. The hive mind thing has been pretty big. And then also fallout and presumably lockdowns. And then the final thing is Disease X. Disease X is pretty big, and it's kind of connected to everything else anyway. Disease X is a World Health Organization term for the big one that's going to take us all down. This hypothetical placeholder name. It's just a placeholder name. They don't actually have a Disease X. They said when it comes, Disease X, we have to be ready. And about that time, Musk purchases Twitter, turns it into X, and we were inundated with all kinds of symbolism linking rage and violence and outbreaks of violence to the monkey, the ape, and the right wing in particular. And this has been a recurring theme as we've been discussing. And this is why we're mind mapping these things out, because it's very extensive, but it's definitely what I'd call concerted messaging. And Disease X has been hyped up, even in, I just said the other day, Naked Gun. In Naked Gun, there's an Elon Musk character named Kane who controls the electric vehicles and crashes his enemies, but he has this device which will turn everyone into violent psychopaths while the elite go hide in the bunkers. Jamarian says 13 is a holy number, but they program people to be afraid of it. More programming to keep you from your divine origin. Yeah, I don't get too deep into gematria, which is just has a faulty premise attached to it. But there is something with symbolism and the numbers do have not intrinsic meaning, but somewhat established meaning that seems to be consistent across the board. 13 has consistently been associated with death, but in the occult world, death is simply the end of a cycle, the start of a new cycle. So it's not an end. Yeah, Begonia had a lot of interesting elements to it, creating fear about conspiracy theorists who are isolated in echo chambers, and some of them are charismatic psychopaths who have a gripe against the system. In fact, there's one scene where the beekeeper guy is trying to show his friend how they can tell an alien from a normal person. And he's like, yeah, and it sounds like a transvestigator, where they're like, well, you look at the shoulder to hip ratio, and then look which finger is longer. Is it the index finger or the ring finger? And then you put this skull overlay over their face. And so they have this kind of pseudo anthropology, phrenology, where they pretend to have some expertise and they can tell you if someone is biologically what they present as. And it's like this whole field of research, the T-vestigators. Well, in Begonia, he's like, well, you can tell it's an alien because of how close the hair follicles are. And then he describes something about the eyes and the skin. And look at the feet. Those are definitely alien feet. So I was like, okay, this movie is actually mocking or characterizing this character as a flat earth, anti-V conspiracy theorist with a gripe against the system who's also convinced that he can discern aliens from people. But the bee thing has been a reoccurring symbol as well. Jamarian says Begonia is a comedy. Okay, I thought it was horror. But what'd you think of at the end? At the end, what'd you think of the domed flat Earth thing? This flat Earth, the aliens are looking at it, and they pop the dome to signify it's game over for mankind. We failed. We're a failed experiment. But the bee thing has been a symbol since, well, in Utah, we mentioned it. The guy that stabbed the girl in the subway had a bee tattoo. We were talking about that. You got drones, of course, the hive, and then the hive has the hexagon. And it does have connections. You know, the third degree Masonic rite talks about the beehive, Templars, beehive symbolism. But it comes down to this idea of the hive mind, of course. And if you're following the program, you are plugged into the hive mind. All right, let's move on. I want to go through my Twitter feed. There were a few things I earmarked. Okay. Oh, that's right. We had talked about this already. The Christian Kirk putting his hand to his throat. Did you all see my blog post? Because we're talking about the Super Bowl coming up and how sports are used as conduits for predictive and concurrent programming. Well, Stephen A. Smith called Christian Kirk Charlie Kirk by accident. And at first it sounds like, oh, it's just a easy to understand mistake. However, it was a 33-yard reception, so that kind of raises a red flag. But then the team that wins has 30 points and the loser has 6, so 36. Charlie was shot with a 30-6. So somebody calling Christian Kirk Charlie Kirk 30-6, 33 yards. Tyler Robinson was caught after 33 hours. If you connect these dots, you're like, okay, that's a lot of coincidences. But then on their Twitter, the Houston Texans post an image of Christian Kirk, a very ominous looking image, where his left hand is jabbed into his neck, right where Charlie was shot. So that's another level of coincidence here. John Santrap says, just so I know, is the Earth flat or no? I like the idea of an infinite plane. It's a good question. Some will say it's not a valid question. You shouldn't even ask. But the question itself contains a thought experiment, and it requires a little bit of self-evaluation. For example, how do you know? And you find that there's a distinction between believers and those who are informed about what they claim to know. And a lot of people are low information believers. They just kind of went with the flow. They saw it on TV. They don't know the specifics, or they don't really care. They just delegate that to the space agencies to tell them what's up. But where's the curve has been kind of this reoccurring question. Have you ever seen it? Do you have any direct evidence, or are you trusting the same sources that have lied about everything else and have been using lies to shape our collective worldview in such a way that is a distortion from objective reality and keeps us plugged into some kind of nonstop psychological warfare campaign, combined with a lot of entertainment, like bread and circuses? So if you don't trust them, what's your basis for believing otherwise? And, you know, there's a lot of reasons why people will say, well, it's round because, or it's a ball because if you go to Antarctica, you see a 24-hour sun. But then they send the most untrustworthy people out there to verify that for us. Too many shenanigans, wits it, spits it, kind of ruin the whole thing. Well, here's vaping on camera. Look, guys, you can see my breath. How did you get a vape in Antarctica? And where are the damn penguins? I have so many questions. But the point of it is, if you don't know, where are you? What does that leave you with? Like, oh, I don't know. I don't trust them, but I haven't really seen the curve. That would leave you in the position of the shape agnostic. And generally, I think that agnosticism is only valid if you've exhausted every attempt to figure it out, and everything that you've found or everything you've been told perhaps doesn't actually explain it. So, well, I'm agnostic for now. I'm waiting for more information. I'm a skeptic. So, can you still claim to be a globe skeptic in 2026? I would say we have plenty of reasons to be skeptical about the world as it's been depicted, both in terms of history, the day to day news, and what it actually looks like. For one thing, the images that were shown from space, the videos that were shown from space are pretty fake looking. I mean, they really put some, I think they still have some pretty antiquated graphics. One of the things that really should kill it for anybody is the shadow on the Earth, the shadow of the ISS that you see with the ESA. If you haven't looked into it, then your opinions aren't that valid. It's a low info opinion. Like, no, I don't believe you guys that they're lying. Well, have you looked into it? Have you considered the evidence? So, what's the point of showing us a false image or a misrepresentation of it? Well, a few reasons. One, perhaps they're hiding land. Maybe we are being ruled from Atlantis, and they're like 200 years ahead of us. So the other day, I got into this bit of a debate with someone over ancient technology, or rather, new technology that's actually ancient. Because I kind of got tired of people saying, oh, AI's always been with us. It's like, well, no. AI is a misnomer. And generative AI in particular required deep learning, a lot of content, a lot of images. It could not have emerged in a vacuum. It required many iterations, and it's a whole process. So it couldn't just show up. You would need the entire collective of people who are working with it for it to even develop. But I'm open to the idea, if there are other continents that are kept out of our frame of reference by a false representation of the Earth, what's more likely? That we're dealing with a sophisticated, highly advanced civilization? Or is it untouched, pristine? And if we're dealing with an advanced civilization, they could easily have developed the stuff independent of us, is what I'm thinking. So the only way I will entertain that idea is if you can explain how it emerged. I mean, this is just purely hypothetical. But if you're trying to figure out, well, why would they lie? What would be the point? And additionally, they give you a model built on scarcity that might be artificial, but also a model that contains the seed notion that our consumption of fossil fuels is going to result in the ocean levels rising and everything burning up or something. Like the whole climate change eschatology is built around this being a closed system, this particular size, this amount of land, this amount of water. You know, if you haven't seen it, Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds, the movie Free Guy is about Free City. And Free City is a city full of NPCs. And they don't know they're NPCs. It's just like a video game world. But one day, the main character has a they live type of awakening where suddenly he finds these glasses, actually, just like they live. And he sees that, oh, look, I'm in a video game. And he starts exerting free will. And every time he makes a decision for himself and he breaks from his program, he deviates from the script, he gains a little more autonomy. So he goes from NPC to autonomous. So now he's a threat to the whole system because he realizes no one's free, only he is. And he has a security guard friend he's trying to force to wear the glasses, very similar to Roddy Piper and his sidekick in the movie. forcing the guy to put on the glasses. Again, Free Guy contains a lot of the elements of They Live. But what breaks the system is when he discovers that outside of Free City, there's an island, there's more land. And when he exposes that, it crashes the system and everybody is unplugged from the program. Kelly Steve says, you shouldn't be asking why would they lie, you should be asking why would they tell us the truth. Yeah, when somebody says why would they lie, I'm like, how have you survived this long? People are liars. Our entire worldview, the consensus worldview, rests upon an edifice of lies agreed upon. This is the lie world order. To ask why would they lie it's a childish question. It's an embarrassing thing for someone to ask. Why would they lie? Because they've always only ever told us the truth. Yeah, that is recklessly naive. I mean, haven't these people ever been scammed at some point in their lives? And then also add into this, for me, this is the concept of a flat or a round earth or whatever is of secondary importance to worldview and how you get it. Because if I was shown a perfect image of the earth from space and I said, oh yeah, that's it, that's what we're on, it's not going to change anything. We're still living in a false worldview. So we have to look at the internal concept of the world as more meaningful and significant than its overall shape. Oblate, spheroid, round, flat, doesn't matter. Because from our perspective, it's going to look the same regardless. We're too small to discern the alleged curve. The entire debate, flat versus round, was always contrived and fake and a controlled debate because they wanted to control between these two models. And I'm saying, if you don't trust the establishment model, it means that you need more information before you can arrive at something to replace it. So you're kind of left in this area of, I don't know. And a lot of people have a hard time saying, I don't know. And the thing is, they can't say they know. If you haven't been to space, the only thing you can say is, I believe. So I'm a non-believer, you're a believer. Neither of us know. What's at the edge of the universe? Nobody knows. There's a limit to our knowledge. We all have to admit, whatever you think about the cosmology and the big picture, nobody knows what's at the edge. Nobody knows what happens at the end of time for us individually when we die. So we're all facing the same essential big questions, the same ignorance. But the program would convince you that they have the answers, or the answers are the answers are already understood. They've already figured it out. And the problem with that is false explanations de-incentivize curiosity and further explanations or further investigations. And if you're thinking about any of these areas anyway, it requires skepticism, meaning new information should change the model. But if you're not even questioning it, you're not skeptical, you're kind of locked in. So ironically, the people questioning the shape of the world are the only ones behaving scientifically in the sense of seeking more information, rational inquiry. Because it's rational to ask, are these liars selectively telling the truth about this? They lie about history. They lie about everything else. Are they telling the truth about the maps? I also find it kind of relevant, too, that Mercator, Gerardus Mercator, the Mercator projection, had a relationship with John Dee, who's the grandfather of modern occultism. John Dee, the original 007 spy for the Queen, creator of Enochian magic and scrying. He used a scrying mirror, a black mirror, to communicate with entities, supposedly. Like he's on an iPhone. Maybe that was it. If 500 years ago you have an iPhone, what do you think people are going to assume? But he and Mercator were in a correspondence discussing a 33-mile circumference black rock at the center of the North Pole. That's what I'm curious about. I want to know what's there first. I don't care about Antarctica. I want to know, is there a black rock at the center of this thing or isn't there? But the round versus flat thing was a big waste of time, and the flat thing was dominated by religious nutcases. And when I say religious nutcases, I'm not trying to be derogatory, but these were people who believed that there's a big glass dome above us that's going to break open, and the Lord's going to look down on us as the glass crushes the non-believers. I've heard that from some of these hardcore domers, and this religious approach also contained the idea that science is the enemy. So it's religion versus science, and I'm like, wait, I'm not signing on with this anti-science thing. Like, if you're against science, you don't know what science is. Candace Owens is like, science is just a pagan religion. Like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? I don't think she can elaborate. Science is not a belief system. It's a form of skepticism and inquiry. It's a system of obtaining information, documenting it, making observations, forming a hypothesis, testing it. And if it's not falsifiable, it's not science. So I'm like, if we're given a false model, you're not going to get out of it by rejecting science and embracing scripture. You're going to figure it out by employing science and challenging the paradigm with another theory, another set of data. Dirk says, I want to go to the North Pole and see it with my own eyes. Look, that's the only thing worth going to right now, I think. Because look, if there's a 33-mile circumference black rock at the center of the world, then maybe that information alone would catalyze significant interest in deeper explorations elsewhere. There's a show called His Dark Materials, which has this feature where when you go to the North Pole, you don't go to the center of the world, but you actually step into this other realm where people are imbued with supernatural powers, and we're considered basically psychically cut off. Sort of like the Hogwarts thing, where the muggles, the normies, on one hand, don't know about this other world where people are wizards, etc. But the His Dark Materials. Let me see if I can pull up a short. Yeah, it's by it was the Golden Compass. Is one of them. It's a trilogy. But here's the setting. The trilogy takes place across a multiverse, moving between parallel worlds. It's a story about a world much like our own, but the technology does not include cars or fixed-wing aircraft, but zeppelins as a mode of transport. So they got blimps. Very Tartarian in a way. But I think what they're doing is they're actually kidnapping children and taking them to this other world. And it does have these strange elements of like almost like adrenochrome, like harvesting. I mentioned John Milton earlier. The phrase "his dark materials" comes from Paradise Lost. Okay, and in this case, though, it's not really about shape. It's a multiverse, parallel universes, and the other world is accessed by going north. And I think that's it's an interesting concept. But what I think it's what's interesting about it is that it's not as mundane as shape and arguing on that simple premise. It's either or, but this is suggesting that maybe that's not even a relevant feature of this thing. Maybe we're missing a bigger picture. But I think the idea of mankind existing in a state of ignorance, ruled over by like this magisterium, seems kind of valid in a lot of ways. I mean, in my view, I consider lying, just simple, the act of lying, to be a form of what you consider black magic. If you consider words as spells and your intent and your will and the words you speak are all part of this process, then what is a lie? Well, a lie is a tool or a method for bending reality. And so a lie isn't necessarily malicious, but it's definitely about warping things, changing somebody's perceptions. And if you can change somebody's perceptions, and this gets into chaos magic theory, where your belief system has a lot to do with the results that you get from your will being exerted. So if you believe that you're an NPC, no soul, you're just an animal, your will might actually be more or less latent and inactive. If you believe in magic, or you believe in the power of prayer, or you believe in the supernatural, you're more likely to get results. So it discusses the idea that belief is a tool to be used, not that you have to believe these things literally. I saw a similar theory in the magic in the Anton LaVey's books on this matter, where he talks about the ritual chamber is used to suppress disbelief. In other words, you're a rationalist, you're objectivist, you're a non-believer, yet in order to tap into this other aspect of the mind, the power, the idea of spells, and to have your will and intent meaningfully imbued into your words, you have to temporarily believe that you're capable of such. So the ritual trappings, the symbolism, the ceremony is actually just meant to confuse your logical mind, to put you into a state of subjectivity, kind of like a hypnosis or something. So my thinking here, though, is that the worldview that we have is intrinsically anti-magical. You have no power here. You're not an entity with agency. There are some who will even say, and this is popular among simulation people, that we don't even have free will. That, oh no, you don't have free will. And like, to me, that's maddening. But anyway, the idea of lying is a form of manipulation through spellcraft at a very basic level. And there are levels to it. And I think that the idea in his Dark Materials of there being this magisterium or different society of people who are a little more tuned in, I think it's somewhat reasonable if you're dealing with a subset of humanity that have a completely different worldview and who haven't been given limited beliefs or limiting beliefs. I was always fascinated by NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and the idea that you can inadvertently accept limitations that aren't actually valid. And if you don't test them, you might never transcend them. And I think that's especially pertinent here because I think we've been given an operating system designed to get those within to internalize limits. For example, Truman never thinking beyond the stage that he's on. And this is why I've always also said that this is not about round or flat, but open or closed. Are you in an open system or a closed system? And a closed system works for closed minds. And a closed mind is a mind that accepts the limitations of the system, this limited selection of options and ideas and points of view in particular. The point of view required to see the world stage for what it is a point of view that takes into account systemic fakery. If you don't know about systemic fakery, if your entire frame of reference is within the box which doesn't include the fakery, the news bending, the history bending, you will never arrive at an accurate picture. It's non-objective. And what we're doing with this timeline thing, it's the unconfusing of the two timelines. They have been confused. They've merged real and fake. And the reason why we're doing this deconstruction in Discord is we want it to be clear. This is what is real, and these are the things they superimposed. And if you look at the things they superimposed as a sequence over many years, you can see this distinction. And the perspective that the average person has deviates from objective reality in the following ways. And you could list all the things they believe that aren't true, the things that don't exist, the needless fears, the fake people they believe are real, and you can see how warped things are. But you can't see it unless you step outside and recognize there are, in fact, two timelines. And the secondary timeline is the result of all the events in the Metascript, which are conveyed to us through not only manufactured events portrayed through media, but they're also pervasive in the entertainment, as we often discuss. Dirk says there are a few laws in this fake reality. I can't figure out why they have to put the truth out in advance. Here's why they do it. See, we figured this out. A lot of people have said, oh, the reason why they tell us is because of natural laws and karma, and by disclosing it, they somehow get absolved of retribution. That's just a bunch of nonsense. The reason why they put stuff in advance is the same reason you get advertisements. It's called product placement. And it's used to get you to know of something in advance, to internalize it, to adopt a posture towards it, an opinion, to habituate you to something or condition that may or may not exist, to make you hypersuggestible. And you have to see an advertisement so many times before you make a buying decision. So they really do saturate the system with these things. And people say, oh, like The Simpsons. And to be honest, The Simpsons is one of the least impressive examples of predictive programming. And most of the stuff is fake. A lot of fake predictive programming and misdirection. It's far more pervasive. So it's not a question of how did they know. What we're talking about here is propaganda placement. So these big platforms reaching millions of people are working with the government. So South Park has somebody probably dressed in black with a black rimmed hat, goes into their production studio, probably late August or something, and they said, hey, we need you to do an episode with this guy Charlie Kirk because nobody's ever heard of him. And we need Charlie Kirk to be asked a question by a blonde guy, and they need to mention gender ideology and mass shootings or something like that, and then knock the Charlie guy off the stage and make him fall to his left. So they do this, and a week later, Charlie Kirk is being asked about gun violence and trans shooters, and then he gets shot and he falls to his left. But more specifically, I mean, we talk about these, like Simpsons and other cartoons. I think what we're looking at is, I mean, I don't want to say they're aware of it, they're part of it, but they're conduits for the propaganda. That's their specific purpose. If you have a big enough platform, you can be given the content that they want in the mass mind. You can sow those ideas. But it's not just South Park, it's anything. It's the big podcasts, big influencers. It's the video games. Video games are huge with this. It's the books. Look, I don't know anybody who watches The Simpsons. I think it's a disgusting show. I've never liked it. It's unaesthetic, and it's probably unfunny. I never liked the portrayal of Homer as this ineffectual, dumb, terrible, abusive father. And then I'm also kind of perplexed by how Bart is now like 45 years old and he's still in the second grade. Like it's a nightmare hell universe where you never get out of the second grade. But I don't think they're culturally relevant anymore. I think South Park has taken that over. But when people say, I don't know how they did this, how do they know? They're coming from a place of this seems like an anomaly. And if you've looked at it as we have, and this is why we're putting all our research into a chronological order here, is that when you look at it long enough, you can predict it. You can predict the predictive programming, as I often do. And I'll mention it. I'll be like, if this Charlie Kirk thing's fake, we will see examples of it on the streaming services. If this movie or this particular movie, because of when it's coming out, it's going to likely tell us about A, B, and C, and it's always correct. And it's systemic, it's recurring, it's predictable, and it's been going on so long that you can actually just recognize this is the model. And what's more, it's not just that they're showing predictive content for these events that are fake that show us these things are staged, but the staged events always have drills alongside them where you can predict the drills. So if it's fake, you're going to see relevant programming in the entertainment, and there's going to be some kind of a drill nearby. And when you predict these things with regularity, you notice the same hoax indicators again and again. It becomes clear that you're looking at entrainment between entertainment and media propaganda. The news and the entertainment are actually synced. And we have so many examples that I need to put it into a timeline and systematize it, because we're so deep into this, so many years into it, that newbies come along and it's like they're still stuck in a 2001 paradigm when it comes to media analysis. And the way to bring people up to speed is to describe the model accurately. And that's what we're doing here. In fact, I am working on a project, and when I release it, you'll be the first to hear of it if you're members here. But I'm promoting the book through a series of whiteboard talks with infographics that explain the model, how it works, why they do these things, in a way that will be intelligible to a complete outsider. It classifies people according to their point of view, their mode of media consumption. Are they main? Are they alternative? And their situational awareness and what this all means. History bending, news bending, the two timelines, how to separate the two. This is all going to have to be described, I think, with copious illustrations. Because we're talking about an invisible prison. How do you describe an invisible prison? But we can describe it. We have the blueprint. We have the architecture of this thing nailed down. So I'm going to convey this in a series of whiteboard talks, which then I am going to use as the basis for the book promotion. And my thinking on it is that anyone who can see through the fake events will gravitate towards this. And if they get it, they'll step out of Trutherville. They'll let go of certain guardrails. Like, nobody dies in PSYOPs. If you still think people die in PSYOPs, you're years behind. Your operating system is not only old and outmoded, but it's designed to keep you in the dark. And that's what we're offering here. I'm not telling people what to believe. This is not a belief system. This is an operating system upgrade. And it is an upgrade. It's an upgrade to go from passively consuming media and reacting to things ignorantly, and actively consuming media skeptically, reserving judgment, non-reaction, becoming a little more informed. You know, these are qualitatively different modes of assessing media. And I would suggest here that the informed non-believer is in a superior position to the low information believer, who's triggerable and a conduit for propaganda themselves. A lot of truthers are just propaganda mules. You're carrying saddlebags full of red pills for Big Brother, and distributing these things like you're doing a good deed. That's inexcusable in 2026. Jamarian May says, even Family Guy is the same gag over and over again ad nauseum. I imagine it's very low effort slop. Did you all hear what Ben Affleck was saying about Netflix? He was saying that the writers of the show are aware that everyone is distracted by their phones. So when they write their scripts, they make them intentionally redundant and the characters over explain the plot points in order to make sure that people who are only half-ass watching it don't miss anything. So they're kind of dumbing it down. At least that's what he's saying. It's probably true. They have to change things when our attention spans change, and the attention economy has destroyed that. That's why they replaced the serial killer with the mass shooter, so they could get the story out there, solved, reacted to within 24 hours instead of dragging it out. All right, let me continue down my Twitter feed. Looks like we got about 85 people here. We've been on for 90 minutes. Thank you all for your comments. Erica Kirk's half sister. So we talked about Erica Kirk's in 2 movies. She's in Black Start about EMPs, came out in 2010. She's also in November Renaissance as a sniper. This is going to be great when we do these Metascript breakdowns. It's not just of the events, it's of the people. These are Frankenstein monsters. They're amalgamations. They're composites. These people aren't real. They're physically real, but they're actors. We're looking at actors, roles, role players. Well, Erica Kirk's half sister comes out and claims that Erica faked the pregnancy, that she was never actually pregnant. And on the ultrasound that Erica Kirk was showing, there were anomalies in the way the name was presented and the timing of it. And Charlie was there. So if they were faking an ultrasound and Charlie was there, then that should solve it for anybody who thinks that Charlie's a victim of this evil woman, which is what the narrative has been. The mainstream is Antifa inspired the shooter to kill Charlie. The conspiracy Candace Owens version is Erica Kirk is involved in all kinds of shady stuff, deep state stuff, and she helped take over TPUSA by seducing Charlie, and Charlie's just an innocent victim. No, Charlie, Candace, and Erica were all in the same script reading sessions like 15 years ago. 15 years ago, these 3 operatives were in a room and like, okay, so you're going to die at 31. It's the next JFK. You are his best friend, and you're going to receive communications from his ghost, and you're going to investigate. And you, Erica, yeah, you're actually behind this plot to take him out. So you're a villain, and you're going to be very obvious that you're not really crying. It's all a script. So anyway, Erica Kirk didn't have any babies. Again, Jake Lang escapes in car. Synchromorpheus had found something intriguing here. So when, again, Jake Lang is a January 6er. So that already tells you he's an actor. And, you know, these actors are not trustworthy. These aren't sources. I mean, they're plants and you can study them in that regard, but they're not people to actually listen and take seriously. If they're part of a psyop, they're compromised. Owen Schroyer, he's a J6er. Alex Jones, J6er. They're insiders. They know these things are big, fake, and staged. They're backstage. They're backstagers. We're not. So Jake Lang's already questionable. I mentioned he was with the whole Austin Metcalf thing. But in the scene where the Antifa members are trying to drag him down off the wall, they have him strangely, well, like his legs are spread and they're ripping his pants off and they're groping him. And so it's a very bizarre picture. And he claims they were trying to rip his limbs off. Well, anyhow, it looks exactly like Sean Penn's character from One Battle After Another. Sean Penn's character has the same haircut. I think he's a ICE agent or something. I haven't seen it yet, but there is a scene reminiscent of what happened to Jake Lang as far as this is really obscene scene. I have to watch it, I guess. But it's just another example here where we find these frequent things where these actors are playing roles, and their roles are often mirrored in the movies. You can see this on my Twitter feed. It's IPS Think Tank. I'll comment further on it when I've seen One Battle After Another, because I've noticed something else. I've noticed there's a certain way that Border Patrol have been characterized in movies that I want to kind of dig into a little bit more here. Is Candace Owens talking about the Mandela effect? Okay, she's trending on YouTube talking about Project Looking Glass. You know, I predicted this. I said, she's never going to be discredited. She's a permanent fixture, standing in for where Alex Jones and David Icke used to be. And she's serving the role of a bridge between red pill and J pill politics. So she can get very outlandish. She can get into anything. The other day she said she's not a round earther and that science is pagan or whatever she said. But Candace Owens is not going away. I study all these individuals who are important parts of the stage. Dirk Zink says, can I ask your take on the Mandela effect? Black Mirror had a show mentioning it. Yeah, the Mandela effect is actually the misinformation effect. So if you're Mandela affected, you're not a liar. I believe that you do believe what you say you believe. However, what you believe is not so. It's called the misinformation effect. It's called retroactive interference, interrogator bias, and the false dilemma. If there was such a thing as Mandela effect, it wouldn't just be one alternate version of everything. But these are false memories that you've been given. And the misinformation effect is very well understood. The misinformation effect is when you recall something in the context of something that conflicts with it in some way that it confuses the two memories. They can actually get you to replace your authentic memories with implanted memories. It's actually pretty easy to screw with people's recollections. And that's what they do with the Mandela effect. So the Mandela effect that you experience, if you have one, it was caused by the person who asked you about it. If your friend said, do you remember Berenstain or Berenstain? And you're like, I don't know. Okay, well, what they did is they presented you with a false binary. And now you recall your memory of the thing. But simultaneously, you imagine the alternate version. Because when they say, do you remember it this way, or do you remember option A or option B? Do you remember Kit Kat with a hyphen or Kit Kat with no hyphen? Well, you recall Kit Kat and there's no hyphen. But they tell you, do you remember this one or the one with the hyphen? And when they say the second one, your imagination creates it. So they're prompting your imagination, kind of like the way you prompt Midjourney. You give it a prompt, it gets an image. So that image that they prompted is now being considered alongside a memory. So now you have a fake thing that you made up with their help, and then you have the real memory. And then it really depends on your psychology as far as whether or not you're going to go with what they're telling you, because they're gaslighting you also. So gaslighting is when somebody tells you you can't trust your perceptions. Your perceptions have been deceiving you on this matter. So they get you to question reality. And once you're in that suggestive state, questioning reality, you could easily conflate your memory with the imagined version of it. And if you accept the premise, then in all likelihood, you're going to go with the alternate version. And there's a whole plethora of Mandela effects that people will go through where there are things that people commonly misremembered, misheard song lyrics, for example. There are many popular misconceptions. A lot of people misspell the same words. These aren't evidences of reality shifting, but they play upon these discrepancies and misconceptions to mess with your sense of reality and get you to take the bait. And now you believe that reality shifted. So it's gaslighting, it's the misinformation effect, it's the false binary, and it's the bias of the interrogator. And there's this thing called the Innocence Project, and a lot of research has gone into this to show how a lot of people who have been wrongfully convicted for a crime on the basis of eyewitness testimony can be exonerated when you look at the interviews. And you find that the police interviewing the witnesses asked questions in such a way that created a false perception. So you can create false memories. It happens all the time. So no, there are no Mandela effects. Case closed. I mean, I officially nailed that coffin closed years ago. And another thing too, the Mandela effect memories are very shallow. I had someone say to me, everybody knows Timmy fell down the well. And I asked, how did they get him out? I don't know. Well, come on. It's a significant thing when the main character in a show falls into a well. Everybody remembers he fell into the well. Was that the last episode? If you don't remember how he got out, was it a crane? Was it a rope? Did Lassie go down there? They don't know. So these aren't real memories. None of the Mandela effects are real. And okay, so a lot of people say, well, I'm pretty sure, and a lot of people will die on this hill. They'll say, Dolly had braces. And to that, I've looked into it. That was a discrepancy acknowledged 15 years before the Mandela effect even became a thing. And there were various reasons why people thought she had them, and mainly because it seems like it would make sense in some kind of rom-com way. I don't even think it's that great of an idea, but a lot of people insist on it. But there's this theory that they whited out the braces because with her pigtails and braces, she looked too young. And then her size, very small, next to Jaws, very big. People thought it just looked kind of bad. So they must have concealed the braces. That was the theory. So that before it became VHS, they erased her braces. So now, if we go with that, then the only people who can claim to remember the braces aren't the people who've had the VHS, which is the majority. The only people who would have a reasonable claim to remember her with braces would be those who saw it in the movie theater in 1978. So unless you were in the theaters in 1978 watching Moonraker, you cannot actually claim to have experienced this discrepancy because this discrepancy would have been fixed. This feature would have been changed before it went to tape. But anyway, that was way before the Mandela effect. So what I'm saying is the person who's giving you who's explaining it to you or questioning you is giving you the Mandela effect. You got tricked. And then some people are saying, no, I trust my memories. It's like, well, you don't know what memory is then. I mean, your memories aren't stored like in a junk drive. You know, they're kind of fluid. And when you're consuming media, especially the reinforcement programming, and you're shown fictional versions of things, these things do get conflated in the mind. They get filed in the same filing cabinets. Eccentric View says Candace Owens' Australian tour got canceled. We never got our tickets refunded. I blew $603 on meet and greet. That's terrible. You should post about that. You know who would want to know is this Twitter account. I think it's Colonel Kurtz. She would definitely dig into that. She's been on this anti Candace Owens thing for a while. And I'm not anti Candace Owens. I don't think she's a crazy conspiracy theorist. She's an actress. She's playing the role of a confusing or confused conspiracy theorist. Jamarin May says, my understanding is what they call a Mandela effect is a nano lobotomy via their tech. It does kill brain cells, but it's not nanotech. The Mandela effect is a mind game. It's gaslighting. It's a misconception. It's not real. There is no Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is a label applied to the misinformation effect. Sort of like there are no chemtrails. That's a label people attach to persistent condensation trails. The logo ones are funny. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I was eating Fruit Loops, and it was spelled Fruit loops. I'm like, when I was a kid, I couldn't spell fruit. But if you've ever seen Fruit Loops, it has OO. And two of the Fruit Loops make the letter O's. And they're like, no, reality changed. Reality shifted. No, actually, that's not the case. The brand Fruit Loops could not legally have put the spelling Fruit because they don't have any real fruit in there. It'd be false advertising. And so that was the reason why that's not even a possibility. But now here's an example of the misinformation effect colliding with the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect people have used Photoshop to create the alternate reality versions of all of their things. So now you've seen Curious George with the tail. Now you've seen the Ford logo without the swirly on it. Now you've seen Kit Kat with the hyphen. So they've polluted the area to where now you've actually seen both of them. You've seen so many pictures of Fruit of the Loom underwear with the cornucopia in it that your memories have been tampered with. Look, this is why you have jury duty and you have to kind of be quarantined so you're not influenced because you will be biased without even knowing it. But again, I stand by my debunk of the Mandela effect. If it was real, there would be 50 versions of everything. And I've gone through them with a fine-tooth comb. None of them make sense at the end of it. Jif or Jiffy peanut butter. Well, okay, look at the Jif logo. You can barely see the JIF on it. There would be no room to spell Jiffy. But I don't think there are any serious Mandela effectees in 2026. T-Dub says you eat Fruit Loops. No, I wouldn't eat it. I'm just saying when I was a little kid, I probably would not have known the correct spelling for the word fruit. And it seems odd to say, I know this is true because when I was 3, I remember this. Like, okay, you're citing ancient memories from our perspective right now. Nobody has ever come forth to me and said, hey, thank you for helping ground me back in reality. I used to be Mandela affected. None of the former Mandela affected ever thanked me for it. They actually hate me for it because a lot of them believed that by perceiving these effects, they're moving into a slightly different reality. And so you have this breakaway civilization where millions of people are now in a different reality functionally. They've just moved. And apparently they thought they were on the path to transcendence. So then I come along and I explain to them how it's all false. They spent years obsessed with the idea that they were seeing through reality, seeing through the matrix. And I come along and I just rain on their parade. And they called me the God blocker. I am now the God blocker. In fact, I wrote a book an ebook called The God Blocker, kind of a Mandela effect thriller. It's short. If you want to find it on Amazon, look up The God Blocker. And I think I remember what it's about. Somebody goes to a conspiracy theory conference, and someone has some Shazam tape and a Berenstain Bears. But back at his house, he's got a locker with examples of every single Mandela affected item in its original form, like Fruit of the Loom underwear, and all that's in there. Paradoxy Moronic says, I'll say thank you, Tim. I was Emmy affected, but I no longer am. Okay, great. Well, welcome back. Welcome back to reality. And the reason why this matters is this. Someone's going to say, because there's an overlap between people calling out media fakery and the Mandela affected. And the Mandela affected are contaminating our research pool with people who have no credibility, because they'll say, well, that event didn't happen. That was fake. And by the way, the logos on all of my favorite brands of cereal have changed. And my heart has moved. And there's more holes in my skull than there used to be. And I'm like, wait a minute here. You're saying reality's fake, but then you're also telling me the news is fake. If reality's fake, then what news is real? What is the standard? If there's no objective reality, then there's no significant it's a distinction without a difference to say this news is fake, this news is real, because reality being fake trumps all that. And if you're someone who thinks that reality is constantly shifting, your opinion on anything is invalid. So maybe 10 kids got killed in that mass shooting yesterday, but tomorrow it might be 0 by your rules. So if you're a Mandela affected person, you're basically saying there is no objective reality. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're not an objectivist, your opinion on the news is invalid. You've discredited yourself as a eyewitness and as a perceiver. Yeah, if you want to go into the Discord server, and that's Johnny Santrap is asking, go to ips.monster. And you'll find a few important links there. 1 is the Discord server. And then 2, 3, and 4, these are the ones that you'll get the archives at. Either Substack, Patreon, or Spotify. And then the final link there is the live YouTube link. Lasers Go Pew says, are there any European, Asian, or African brands that have changed? No, the Mandela effect is uniquely an American phenomenon. And in Africa, none of them have ever heard of it, even though it's all about Nelson Mandela. And no Mandela affectees have read biographies on Nelson Mandela. Like, they're not in a position to even opine on the matter. And some of them have openly lamented the title of their theory. Like, why can't it be the Ed McMahon effect? Egg McMahon, or whatever. He's like the guy with the big checks. I'm like, big checks. I don't have any friends who are like, yeah, I come from old money. My grandmother got a check from Ed McMahon. Like, no, there aren't any people out there living off of fortunes that came from Ed McMahon. That never happened. Sprightly says, demiurge tinkering. No, there's no such thing as a Mandela effect. Simulation theory is not even a theory. It's just a poorly thought out hypothesis. There's no evidence for it. It's fallacious thinking. It's bad reasoning. It's designed to confuse you. I mean, it's bad enough that our consensus worldview is a confused merging of real and fake, fiction and news, and that our history is manipulated. But then people want to throw in this stuff, and this is all by, I think, the intel agencies. They want to throw in things like, well, reality's fake. Nothing's real. Everything's fake. To me, that's cognitive sabotage, and it's designed to keep you in a state of subjectivity. Elon Musk tweeted this the other day. Most politicians are just actors on the stage. You don't see the scriptwriters, directors, or producers who control them. Elon Musk saying this, I mean, that's It's not like kettle calling pot black. What this is, it's deflection. And it's true. It's actually true. Is it Ed McMahon or Egg McMahon? Is that a Mandela? And I looked into that one as well. Like everybody knows, Ed McMahon passed out big checks. Well, apparently he doesn't know. In fact, I've discredited all these things. And again, I made a lot of enemies. I made enemies, and a lot of people got mad at me because I took away their miracle. Because that's the thing. If you have tangible evidence of reality shifting, that's a miracle. That's a miraculous thing. That's a relic. You find some old Fruit of the Loom in storage and it's got a cornucopia. That comes from another universe. That's a big deal. That's proof of higher powers. That's more evidence than any of the religions have for their gods. So the Mandela effect is a huge deal. It's a big deal, if true. Significant implications, transcendent. The only legitimate miracles that we can actually document are the Mandela effects, if real. So you could see why people get attached to these things. And that's why they called me the God blocker when I took it away from them. In reality, I'm saving their souls. You don't want to lock yourself into a false paradigm that has you genuflecting before some quantum computer theory and CERN. It all leads to CERN. One of my favorite Mandela effects, by the way, is Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A doesn't have a K in it, or it does have a K in it. Depends on which side of the Mandela effect divide that you're on. So a lot of people say, no, it's there's no K in Chick-fil-A. It's just like chic. Like, well, how did they arrive at that? So one day I went to Chick-fil-A to get some of those crisscross fries. And I noticed that on the box only has room on the front for CHIC. The K is on the side of the box. So if you ever got these crisscross waffle fries from Chick-fil-A, you would be reading it as chic every single time. So when somebody says, do you remember Chick-fil-A or Chick-fil-A with the K, without the K, they're going to tell you the truth. I don't remember the K. And they're like, boom, it's because reality shifted. No, it's because the box didn't have room for it. So your memory is correct. Your interpretation of the misremembrance is wrong and being steered by somebody with an agenda to take you out of objective reality and into this simulation concept. T-Dub says you're reaching now. What do you mean I'm reaching? If you're saying reality shifted, you've overreached. There's no evidence for it. It's a nonsensical claim. Chick-fil-A has a K, always has. But if you've never seen the box of fries, that's absolutely true. But Mandela effect is one of these very popular things as well. It's heavily promoted by the system. And I think it's because they will promote anything that makes you a little easier to control, a little more confused, a little less certain. It's a confusion op. Johnny says, Lord's Prayer in school, we didn't say it like it was written in the 1920 Bible. Yeah, I've heard all these Bible effects, and those all have valid explanations. One of them said, oh no, Jesus wasn't hung on a cross. He was hanged in a tree because the word actually changed. And I'm like, well, then why aren't people wearing trees around their necks? Yeah, look, if you believe in Mandela effects, you've been fed a lie by misinformation agents designed to cognitively impair you, to disassociate you from reality, and to discredit you. You're no longer an eyewitness to reality if your reality shifts around and changes and the spelling of words changes. And a lot of people have a difficult time admitting when they're wrong. That's actually very common. And I've seen people with this sickness, and they'll say things like, well, the word dilemma. Well, the word dilemma used to have an N in it. So it's Dilemna, like dilemma. But no, it has two M's. But instead of saying, well, oh, I'm wrong, I misspelled it, they say, no, all the dictionaries are wrong. Everybody in the world's wrong but me. I'm right, reality shifted. So take out Occam's razor. What's more likely with anything? That everything in reality changed and you're right, or that you made a mistake, or that you're in error. And if you can't admit you're wrong, you're going to be an easy prey for Mandela effect recruiters. And you'll get dragged into that cult. And it is a cult. You know it's a cult because it's a group think thing. They arrive at it by consensus. Like, oh, like what are your Mandela effects? Oh yeah, I have this one. I have that one. And it really is a cult. And I'm not knocking it. It's just a religion. It's a cult like any other cult. It's based on miracles. And miracles are attractive. But as I said, I'm not debating people who are settled in their opinions or people with unfalsifiable models. I'm like, have at it, because it's going to make it easier for us as we split into this third branch of media, as we establish this off-world stage perspective. We need to draw a distinction. We need to deepen the chasm. We need to show that there's a big difference between your perspective and our perspective. There's a huge difference. And your perspective is fundamentally gate-kept, guardrailed, misinformed, and it's a closed system that excludes the relevant data you would need to find out what the hell's actually going on. Jamarin says, you have to admit reality's fallen off its tracks over the past 5 years. Everything seems inverted, contorted. Well, I would say no. I mean, yeah, you can say the last 5 years, but I would say it's much further back. In 2015, they declassified the hyper-realistic masks, which reveal that we've been exposed to fake people long before generative AI. Like, we were born into a deep faked reality. Skyfish says, that's true about the cross, but it's not a Mandela. I grew up, Jehovah's Witness, they always knew the word was tree. The Babylonian moles in Christendom pushed the T for Talmuz. See, I've heard that, but I've also heard the word wood, like the woods, and tree doesn't necessarily mean it was a literal tree. It could have been carved from a tree, but whatever. Didn't they say it was dogwood? But see, I'm not of the opinion that it was like that Christianity's been hijacked or co-opted by Mystery Babylon. I actually think that the mainstream religion is a watered down version of the pagan one. Like Candace Owen says, science is a pagan religion. Well, I would argue that Catholicism and Christianity is fundamentally pagan. If you look at the rites, the symbols, the astrotheological components. And this isn't an opinion I got from watching a YouTube video. I look at the consistency of the religion in its various aspects, denominations, and then the mystery schools. And I went to a Gnostic version of the Catholic Mass. It was a publicly performed OTO event. And I walked away from that, pretty well convinced that what I saw was definitely just like the Catholic Mass, only they had a goddess. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is that if you look at the pagan underpinnings of the Catholic Mass, you're looking at the same old sun worship. You're looking at personifications. You're looking at anthropomorphized versions of natural forces. You're looking at stories that are told at a human level, but that are actually reflective of the cycles of nature, of time, and the sun rising and setting. But it's inherently pagan. Dirk Zink says, "Are you saying NPCs are real?" Well, human beings have agency. However, if you outsource your thinking and you go with the program and you're going along with their scripts, you're functionally an NPC. Although, according to the Gnostic idea, the NPCs will always be NPCs. That some people are just not here to wake up, to acknowledge their soul spark. They're just part of the infrastructure, soulless, agency-less, will-less NPCs. So there might be. But I don't know. I mean, I find it kind of dehumanizing, to assert somebody might be an NPC, but I think you can be a de facto NPC. I like to think that everyone could potentially exert their own free will at some point, that we're not entirely, conquered and programmed. But I am certain too that there's this back and forth, something of a struggle over those in the gray. Like who's going to sway them? I think we could consider spiritual war. It's more of a game. Maybe it's spiritual warfare. But I certainly think that's a component here, but not everybody's involved in it. Not everybody is front lines. And I think it's a matter of light versus dark, adherence to the world stage, and the lies versus the truth. So this whole world is bent by lies. Our self-concept, our operating systems are bent, manipulated to make us compatible with the lie system. And I think there are a lot of enforcers. And these enforcers aren't soulless, but their souls are grounded here. They're almost like anti-souls, like dark souls. And then others are more light-based, and they're recognizing truth as distinct from the lies. The NPCs are those who just go with the lies. They're not necessarily the liars, but they're complicit in the system of lies. They don't challenge it. Believers. And you spell believers, belief, with a lie in the middle of it. And, that's not just trite. I think it's actually profound. There's a big lie in the middle of the word, believer. Anonymous says the ME channels are the worst channels I've ever subscribed to. They're delusional, ignorant, and boring. Yeah, their miracles are not even that impressive, to be honest. And you listen to like the simulation people, the Mandela people, they're sort of the same. They always talk about the double slit experiment and Schrodinger's cat. I'm like, okay, Schrodinger's cat's a joke. It wasn't a serious proposition that this hypothetical cat isn't really alive or dead until it's perceived by a third party. That was somebody just taking the idea of quantum physics to the scale that we could actually see it, to note how ridiculous a concept it is. The double slit experiment that somehow for some people proves that the observer determines whether something is a particle or a wave. Well, the observer doesn't refer to you looking at things. It's referring to the measuring device in the context of the experiment. So these are ideas that have been malappropriated by truthers and used to back up the idea that we're in a simulation. The 100th monkey syndrome, fake. Myth at best, not true. But the Mandela effect thing, the reason why I spent time even debunking it is that I think it's an active measure designed to target those who see through fake news. Like, we've got this growing body of people who see through the fake news. What do? Convince them everything's fake. And then when they rant about it over Thanksgiving, they're going to be talking about obscure logos and bad movies nobody's seen and old ancient episodes of TV shows, and they're going to sound crazy because it is crazy and it's wrong. It's not the right explanation for what they're experiencing. What they're experiencing, though, this is the main change that I've had in my outlook, because I used to suggest these people were being, fooled and duped and they're being dishonest, but I'm actually convinced that the Mandela effect people are not lying in the sense of intentionally lying, but rather their memories have been messed with. So they really believe it, which is kind of sad, but that's what happens when you don't recognize the mind games and you accept a faulty premise. But I'll probably republish my Mandela effect takedown. I want to actually expand it because I did some more research into the misinformation effect. And I think the misinformation effect is used quite extensively. Dirk says, have you figured out what happens when we die and are done with the fake, insane world? Personally, I think it's one of two things. I think that if you are even slightly aware that you're not merely a byproduct of a biological organism, I think if you're soul centric, I think you continue. Like, I don't think death is real. And I don't think people are in the past. Like, you think like somebody passed away. Well, yeah, you share a past, but I think that when you leave this place, you're actually in the future. Like, these terms shouldn't be thought of so linear, in a linear way, past, present, future, as we experience it here, but they're outside time and space in eternity, and they're there when you die. So they're technically in your future from this perspective. So death is not the end, in my view. But I also don't think that immortality or continuity of awareness post-mortem is a guarantee. I think if you live your life as an NPC, incurious, if you don't know thyself, I think if you live as a beast, I think you face oblivion. I think your soul, I think some big scary deity with a dog head weighs your heart against the feather. And if your heart weighs more than the feather, they feed you to the alligator-headed deity, and then you're just deleted or recycled. You incarnate again in complete ignorance of what came before. But I think that if your heart is lighter than the feather, you go to Valhalla, hang out with Charlie Kirk. But I don't think that heaven and hell are real in that sense. I think that we are essentially the bottom of this thing. Like, hell is here. It's something you experience bodily. And I think that heaven and hell is like more of a description of the range of our sentience from the egocentric hell perspective to the transpersonal, transcendental, celestial, heavenly perspective, the outside time space. So it's a matter of perspective. Isn't that something John Milton said? The mind can make a heaven and hell, and a hell of heaven is thinking that makes it so. Anonymous said, the first time I showed up in 2 different Mandela Effect channel chats, they said I was a troll based on my username. You have 3 6s, and they said Mickey Mouse profile pic is demonic. Oh, Mickey Mouse is a demon. I've seen that. Mickey upside down is wicked. And then he had the wizard hat. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about Disney that we could probably look into. We should look into. But I did notice, too, that a lot of the Mandela effecty people are kind of like, they're sort of religious in that sense. Like, they're biblical Mandela affected. Some people are, I've come across some people who said, I don't believe in any of the Mandela effects except the Bible ones. The Bible changed. I'm like, isn't the Bible one of the most edited books in existence? And isn't it open to subjective interpretation anyway? Although Mandela effect is old news. I mean, we dealt with that a long time ago. This in 2025, I made it a point to take down the gematria calculator crowd. The gematria number crowd, because the numerology they do to make connections between things in the news, that's not what it's for. It's used by rabbis discussing the Torah, and by using this numerology, connecting the numerical value of a word to another word with the same numerical value, they arrive at connections. To them, in this context, it proves the scripture is divine, because there's no way man could have planned all these amazing connections. It therefore means God. Well, when they do this with the news, these conspiracy people with their calculators, they say, well, this event was 66 years and 6 months and 6 days after this event. It's so intricate. These connections are so deep. Man could not have done this. Same argument. Well, I'm sorry, but gematria does not prove God or higher powers. It's proving that you can be fooled by fallacious reasoning, the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, selectivity bias, etc. But one of the other things that we've done here with this, we quarantined. You see, this off-world stage perspective is the result of a deliberate quarantining from those who are still buying into a lot of the popular conspiracy theories that were planted there to take your time and attention and to keep you part of a demographic they control by inundating you with propaganda from their influencers. So alt media is compromised. Alt media is not anti-establishment, it's part of the establishment. If you want to be outside the establishment, you got to come here. Eccentric View says, I love your work, Tim. Please never tell. Oh, yes. Never get squibbed off the YouTube stage. Well, I have a long-term plan here. And by long-term, I mean this isn't going to stop. And it doesn't mean that we're slow or that this is inevitable. We're making haste with this thing. We're moving fast. And I'm attempting to move faster. I'd like to scale up. So I appreciate the support there. Every donation goes into accelerant for the IPS think tank. And what we're doing here is we're going to, figuratively speaking, burn the world stage. So we need all of that support we can get. Mostly what we need these days is research, your time, your focus. So instead of paying attention to these operatives, these phonies, and these rabbit trails, you should focus it on the great deconstruction. And right now we're at the early stage where we are consolidating all of our research into threads for each of the major psyops. I'll be utilizing AI to get accurate sources and to organize the content and to put it into a chronology. So you can look at this as an encyclopedia. We're creating an encyclopedia of media psyops for the last 100 years. And this encyclopedia will show that there is a definite timeline here. There's a definite program. Like you go to a play, there's a program. It tells you what's going to happen by the hour. Well, there's a program that describes everything that's going into our future and a lot into our past. But this program, this separate timeline, has been surreptitiously inserted into our real timeline. So there's two timelines, and we're splitting the two. And that's what we're creating here. This separate timeline, this delineation, it'll make it easier for people to perceive the world stage for what it is. Because there's a lot of people who pretend like they're insightful for calling everything fake. Like, that's not good enough. It's not just like, that's at this point, you're just stating the obvious. You could do this stuff blindfolded. Oh, yeah, it's fake. That's fake. That's fake. It's easy to do. It's not particularly insightful when everybody's saying it's fake. In fact, the word fake has been diluted. And I'm saying these events aren't merely fake or hoaxes. These are historically significant events that are totally fabricated, that are persistent, that will never go away, that are part of our consensus worldview. And when you're looking at the news right now, today, this minute, you have to incorporate the preceding fakery into your assessment right now. If you're talking to a liar who has a history of lying and manipulating, you should take everything they say with a grain of salt. You have to have a awareness of their propensity for lying. So when you're consuming news media, you have to realize you're dealing with a liar. Big Brother is a big liar. Dirk says good night. Thank you, Tim. Love your work. Yeah, appreciate everyone's comments. And this is we talked about the hive mind and pluribus, and the mayor of New York talking about we got to get rid of individualism and replace it with collectivism. But the reason why is that there's power in numbers. And I'm not a collectivist, but this organization is not something one individual could do. This is a collective effort. This is a group project. This think tank is gaining momentum, even though our numbers are smaller, short, and we don't have the numbers that we did before, but that's easy to fix. I thought it was more important to focus on the information, codifying this philosophic framework, and having a firm basis for when we go into the next phase. And that's going to kick off here very soon. I expect to be back in an office space with open phones, an 800 number, caller queue, all of that within a couple of weeks. Hopefully before the next Parkland hoaxiversary. All right, well, thanks for your comments and time. I'll see you all in Discord. I'm going to start putting a lot of... In fact, one more point. I'm not sure what time. Maybe it'll be 4 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time, but there's going to be an hour every day, and I'll put it in the scheduler in Discord, where I'll be in the voice chat on Discord. And during that hour, I'll be adding in information into the different forums that we created for this deconstruction project. So if you want to get in the voice chat, I'll have it on the scheduler. So if you're in Discord, you'll see it'll actually post it on top. And yeah, we're going to get a 1-800 number, and I'm going to use the same system I did before. It gave us call waiting, caller queue, voicemail. Very nice system. A little costly, but it pays for itself. I mean, not that expensive. It's an expense, but it's 100% worth it. And our reach will go up, especially when I upgrade Restream and we're on 7 or 8 platforms. I mean, there's no reason we shouldn't have 200 people every night, and there's no reason we shouldn't have at least half an hour devoted to just back-to-back callers. Go to ips.monster and you'll find a link to Discord. I'll post it below. Just go click that link, and beneath the radio player, it says Discord. The very first link. All right, we'll see you all in Discord or tomorrow. And tomorrow at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, I'll be on with Fakeologist. So that's an opportunity to call in and ask us